Come with us on a journey into the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable. We will test your senses and challenge your beliefs. A world where science and religion clash. Or do they? You will meet real people and hear real stories, but you will not believe. You will witness strange sights and hear strange sounds, but you will not believe. This is the New England Ghost Project. Welcome to the nightmare.
And good evening, everyone, and welcome to Ghost Chronicles Next Generation, right here on TogiNet, Pararex, where else? Ghost Channel, EBC TV.
And Planet Paranormal, right?
Soon. When you give me your bio, then we'll be on Planet Paranormal. Anyways, welcome to Ghost Chronicles, and we have a great show for you.
Yes, we always do.
Always great.
That's right.
Except when I'm not here, of course, but that's besides the point.
Then they're better.
Yeah. So anyways, before we get into the show and our guest, you were on vacation, I guess, right?
Yes.
Which is why we're having this the second Wednesday of the month instead of the regular Monday one.
Yeah, I kind of messed up the pecking order
there. Is never a regular Monday, but that's all right. But anyways, so you were on vacation, and you went into this antique shop.
Yes.
And you bought a little monkey hat.
Yeah, I bought a monkey hat.
Which, for those who we don't know, is one of those what?
It's a fez. It's a Shriner's fez. You know those, the funny, they're like...
monkey hats.
Yeah, they're like a little monkey hat. But they're like burgundy colored, and they have a tassel, for those who might not know what a Shriner is.
So do you get to drive a little car?
Yeah.
Do you get to drive a little car?
I get to drive a little car. But no, the Shriners are a great group, but I just happened to stumble across this fez in an antique store. I'm not really sure, why it was there. It doesn't look like an antique, but it's mine now.
Yeah, but there's more to this story.
There is more to the story.
Because while you were in the store,
yes, what
happened?
Well, I was up in Maine in the Bar Harbor area.
I thought you said a bar. Probably, if I know you.
No, in Bar Harbor, that area, it's like it was Ellsworth, or I'm not exactly sure which town it was in. But it's this fabulous antique shop. It's an old converted barn with a silo, and I had been dying to stop there all week. So I finally got an opportunity to stop by myself, because when you're with your family, sometimes you can't do things by yourself. So I'd gone through most of the building and found my little fez, and I got down to the bottom floor and went to, I was just about like in the back left-hand corner, and as soon as I walked into this particular dealer's booth, I was just, had that tightness and heaviness like in my chest right here, and breathing was like a little constricted, like like that. And so I'm not a psychic or anything like that, but that's how I felt in this booth. Like, I knew there was something in there that was bothering me that I didn't like. So I kind of made myself walk in and came upon this large picture. It's probably, that big.
That's good for radio, yeah.
Yeah, it's big. About yay big, you radio people, but really, probably, I don't know, a foot across by 2 feet high. And it was a black and white. It was a painting, but it was very, very lifelike. And it was just dark, dark black with almost like a silhouette kind of painting of the man in the white. And he just had the most just glaring, cold stare. And that was it. That was what was bothering me. I knew right away, and then I left because I was all done.
So you think it was the painting that?
That was what I thought. That was what I thought, and naturally I did not take a picture of it, and now I'm kicking myself.
You what?
That I didn't. I know.
It's like the time I got slimed and never took a sample.
I know. Yeah.
One of those moments of life.
So that was my little moment.
Why don't we ask somebody, a professional's opinion of this?
Okay, I think that's a great idea.
So we have with us on the show today, fresh from his appearance on Coast to Coast, is Keith Johnson. I didn't know how to introduce you.
You forgot his name.
No, I know his name. It's Keith. It's either Keith or Carl. I had a 50-50 chance, you know. Keith, of course, is, you were a member of TAPS, and of course was on the first season or first 2 seasons?
First 2 seasons.
Of Ghost Hunters. And you were the demonologist at the time, right?
Yes, my brother and I were the demonologists.
Welcome.
Welcome.
So
Absolutely.
you heard Anne's little story here, Keith. You get anything from that, or what's your thoughts on that?
About the Shriner hat?
You should have brought it.
What do you think about that? I know. I can run out to my office and get it if you'd like.
Yeah. Well, some things and some areas seem to have attachments. And by that I mean there's some kind of spiritual force lingering. Maybe something happened on the premises, or some kind of ritual was conducted, or the way certain people lived, or maybe a person that had an attachment was there at one time. The person may have expired in the area, and for some reason that we're not totally sure why this happens, but it somehow gives a spirit a legal right to stay there and be in the area. So there are things that can be attached to objects, to non-animate objects, and rooms and people too. So all of these can have attachments, spiritual attachments.
So have you ever run across anything like that?
Yes, I have, where a spirit lived, well, I was told a spirit lived in this little Buddha statue, and actually it was a female exorcist that had this little Buddha statue, and she said her familiar spirit lived inside this little Buddha statue. Now, I don't think it lived inside it, but I do think it had an attachment to this object and would hover around it. Maybe this object was energized, and it could have come in and out of that object. See, spirits they possess people. They don't really possess objects, but they can form an attachment to material objects and linger around them, and sometimes even become energized for some reason. Some objects, we might call them tainted, or otherwise they've been used in some kind of worship, or maybe even profane worship, sacrifice. That sometimes energizes an object, like a statue or something, and the spirit somehow seems to draw energy from that object, like a battery.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, Carl, is when I first started doing this, and you know I had no interest in the paranormal when I started doing it. I was kind of like roped into it, I think.
Right.
But anyways, when I first started doing it, and I heard about, you know, attachment, how spirits can attach to objects and stuff.
Right.
And to me, I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. It doesn't make any sense. But then I started to think about my faith, which is Catholic faith. You know, I'm very much a devout Catholic, and still am. And I started thinking about, you know, what are relics? You know, the Catholics have different relics, first, second, and third degree relics. You know, first degree is actually a piece of you, could be a whatever. So
Want a piece of me?
Yeah. Another one could be something that you held, or you know, like a piece of clothing, or something like that. So if I believe in that as a Catholic, then why shouldn't I believe that spirit would attach themselves to an object as well?
Oh, yeah.
That really meant something to them.
Right, exactly. So an object can either be positively charged or negatively charged. It can be a holy object or a profane object. But it does, the object does have a certain vibration to it. It's energized, it has a certain vibration to it, so like a holy relic. And that's why we do, like, well, for example, can I get into some of the tools of the trade there?
Absolutely.
Yes. A cross. It's a simple cross that this is made out of palms, you know, for Palm Sunday.
Yep.
And the palms are blessed. The palms are blessed.
Yep.
And of course, when they are burned, the ashes are used for Ash Wednesday. And so this actually carries
Are you
holy
Catholic?
vibration. No, I'm
But
not
you know this
Catholic,
stuff,
but
right?
I do
Yeah.
know this, yes. Yes. So this.
So I'll let you know if you're wrong in any of that.
Okay, you correct me if
But
if
you're
I
right on the button.
overstep my bounds there.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do have holy vibrations on them. They are sanctified and blessed, and so that carries that holy vibration or that purity with it. And that's one way you can use a certain amount of provocation. Now, I I'm very hesitant about provocation, but provocation is very easy to do when you're in a spiritual atmosphere. But if it is a negative or parasitic, unholy spirit, whatever you want to call it, they will be aware that an object like this has a holy or sacred vibration on it, that it's been blessed by a holy person, and for a positive means, altruistic. So a spirit will tend to shy away from these. But if it's cornered, like any sort of creature, it will tend to fight back. So if it's cornered, it's going to react. And that's where you get holy vibrations, and sacred objects can affect certain negative spirits and get them to reveal their presence. Now,
on that note, and I know we're going to get into some
Yeah.
of it. Well, actually, I'm going to let you go on. Go with your other
well,
stuff. Go ahead.
it's the same thing. This is a blessed candle.
Yep.
Now, of course, it doesn't look unusual. It's a white candle, but it has been blessed. Now, the theory is that when you burn this, it will spread out, the holy vibrations will emanate, kind of purify the air, kind of like blessed incense, you know, burning a candle. And we have seen it be very effective in certain situations. And even from a psychological standpoint, if somebody's oppressed by negative entities, or they're having a disturbance in their house, or they just feel uncomfortable themselves, this can have a very good psychological impact too, make people feel more at ease. And of course, we have the blessed oil, the anointed oil, and we actually use that in our house blessings. We anoint doors and windows with that, and of course, you know, somebody could say, well, it's a spirit. If it wanted to get in through a crack in the door, it could. And yes, it well could, but this is more of a symbol. It's a symbol, and you're spreading out the holy vibrations, putting it on doors and windows, and that makes kind of a seal there where the spirit will recognize that and hopefully respect that, because we go into these situations very respectfully. We hope that the spirit will react respectfully too, although that's not always the case, of course.
And I mean, you see some of these shows on TV.
Yeah.
They don't go in very respectful in
Well,
a lot of these
yeah,
cases.
that's one of
And
my...
that kind of irritates me.
Yeah, Ron, that's one of my pet peeves when you see people doing that, because, yeah, it does make for a good show, and it does get reaction a lot of the times. But you think when somebody goes in with this over-provocation, now sometimes, yes, sometimes it is warranted. Sometimes you're in a situation where you just get so upset when you see people being oppressed or hurt. But to do it just to get a reaction or to show off, I mean, you have to have a certain amount of respect, because what is it you're provoking? What if that is the lingering sense of somebody that was a loved one, or somebody that passed away in that house, and you're insulting that person's memory by hurling out these insults and everything? Somebody that may have had 4 children in that house and lived their life in that house, maybe some of their essence, some of their vibration is still lingering there, and you're insulting that. And that's very hurtful. These are things that sometimes can't defend themselves or answer back. And if it is, say, spirit of perdition, an unholy spirit, well, I think if they could actually see, if that was embodied, if they could see what they're talking to, then they'd be a little more hesitant to shout out at this celestial being. If they knew exactly what they were talking to, something that has the wisdom of the ages, has been around much longer than us, has a great amount of power, and is, as I said, a celestial being. So I think they'd be a little more hesitant if they knew what they were talking to.
And do you feel that like some spirits are really like misunderstood, in that they actually might be trying to reach out to a homeowner or someone else, and their intentions might be misunderstood by the living? Oh,
yes. Yes, because it's very, very difficult for them to communicate with the living. A spirit is just that, a spirit. And the, of course, root word for spirit, pneuma, is basically air. So they are on a spiritual plane. To communicate on our level is very difficult, just like it's difficult for us to communicate on their level. And that's why, as you well know, a lot of the communication is done through EVP, electronic voice phenomena. And they are on a certain, some people describe them as being in another dimension. I like to describe them as being on a different frequency, almost like a radio wave. And of course, that's where the spirit box comes in. Yeah, they are like on a different frequency than us. And they, if you can sometimes tune into that, there are certain times, certain hours, certain days that it's easier to tune in than others, just like reception, just like radio reception. I find that when you are going in dawn, for example, when daybreak comes, that the veil seems a lot thinner and it's easier to communicate. I'm not saying everybody should go out and communicate because there's obviously inherent dangers in that. But
so do you believe, like in a witching hour, that time period when the veil is the thinnest between the two, supposedly, is that what you're kind of getting at?
Well, the witching hour, of course, being 12 midnight, the witching hour, and of course the high noon of the demonic is 3:30 a.m. And there's also a thinness of that veil, so to speak, at twilight and sunrise, when you can almost feel it. It almost becomes tangible when things start to quiet and things get dark. And then suddenly your perception changes. You know, we all realize that our perception changes as it starts to get dark and things start to get quieter, and you start to hear kind of the sounds of night and the night animals. And then at the dawning, when it becomes light and the birds start to chirp and everything, that's a transition too. And it's at these transition points that you can usually hear something or feel something a little more tangible than usual.
I think I'd rather be at that transition point at dawn rather than, 3 a.m. or,
I'm going out with you, yeah. I know that for a fact. No, I know I'm kind of carrying a conversation in, and I do apologize, but I've been dying to talk to Keith about some of this stuff. But just as he was going to talk about the holy water, he put it down, which kind of like, I had this great question I wanted to ask you, because I've been asked it many times myself.
Please do ask away, yes.
So you have, talk about the holy water first.
The holy water, of course, that has been blessed. That has been consecrated, just like the Holy Eucharist is consecrated. It's a piece of wafer before it's consecrated. This is water that has been blessed. It looks like regular tap water, but it does have holy vibrations on it. Touching it, I would not be able to tell, because I am not sensitive. I would not be able to tell if it's blessed or not, but there are certain people and spirits that will know right away if it's been blessed or not.
Right.
If you remember the scene in The Exorcist, the famous movie, The Exorcist, where the possessed individual knew that it was, could tell whether it was blessed or not. And of course, in the course of the story, actually pretended that it was burning her. But yeah, so this does have the sacred vibrations on it, and we do use it for an altruistic purpose. We would go into houses and bless windows and doors and spray this around. And my helpmate, Sandra, my wife, my other half, of course I'm a twin too, so I guess that's my other third or whatever, but Sandra is invaluable to me in the work, as we call it. She's very compassionate, very courageous. She goes into these houses with me, and I've never seen her show fear once. It's not that she's antagonistic, but
no do-run dude, right?
Right, exactly. No do-run dude. Yep, we've had a lot of experiences with that. Yes. Yep. But yeah, so Sandra does assist me in the house blessings and the blessing of people too, and sometimes deliverance as well.
Excellent. So you have your books, and I want to talk about them, especially the first one, where how you first got involved in this. But I know that, I wrote my book, Ghost Chronicles, with Maureen when I was a medium. And if you ever read our book, there's lots of holy water in it. We bless everything with holy water. We bless equipment. We bless everything with it. And we took a lot of flack for that, okay? And so this is the question that I received many times because of this book and because of what we do. So I'm going to give it to you and see what your response is. And the question is, okay, I would say I would bless things with holy water, and someone would say, well, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world, because what if the spirit is Muslim or Jewish or anything and doesn't believe in holy water? And what would your response be?
I've seen, it's been my personal experiences that spirits will react to these negative or holy vibrations. Despite what the background is, usually you will get a reaction. They will know whether it's been blessed or not. They know where they're coming from. They know if they're for a parasitic or a negative purpose, or they're for a holy purpose. So it depends on the kind of reaction you get from the spirit. Of course, you don't always see the reaction. The reaction is not always noticeable.
Right.
Some spirits tend to be very hidden, and you don't see them most of the time. Very rarely do you see spirits with your visual perception. But I think all spirits do have some kind of reaction despite the background.
Do you think part of it's because of intent as well? It's your intent that you believe in
Oh,
holy
yeah,
water works,
definitely.
so therefore...
Absolutely, absolutely. You go in there with an altruistic purpose. You go in there with faith, and that makes all the difference. That makes all the difference. And there's even biblical examples of that, of course. And even if somebody's atheistic, suppose somebody didn't really have a firm spiritual belief or no belief at all. We go into houses where people don't really have that foundation of a spiritual belief, but we advise them, if they want to get rid of negativity, just be as positive as possible. You know, that will do a lot to dispel negative vibrations, be, just uplifting, have things bright, and all to do with the attitude, and that makes a world of difference.
Okay.
When you go in to a house, would you also use the holy water on your own self?
Oh, yes. Yes. In fact, we do that before we leave a house, especially if there's a known haunting there. We try not to take any chances, and so before leaving, we do bless each other with blessed oil and blessed water, and we always say a prayer that nothing negative or unholy will be allowed to follow us, only that which is angelic, positive, and of the light. We always say something to that effect, and we've been very fortunate so far, by the grace of God, that nothing has followed us. I'm not saying we haven't worked with people that, some people have been followed. One of our members had our New Hampshire affiliate, Andrew Graham. He had something follow him from an investigation we did in a house blessing. And his wife had told him, I don't care if you do this, just don't bring anything home. Don't bring anything home, that's all I ask. Well, something did come home, and they felt a cat, even though they didn't have a cat, they felt a cat running around the bed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they felt it on their legs and everything. That lasted for only a few days. It won't always last. That was just for a few days, say, look, I'm here, and then it dissipated.
Right.
But something did follow him.
So Keith, you have written 3 books now.
Yes.
And your first one, you want to hold that up for so that
Yes.
Can we close in on that one, guys? There
you go.
There we go.
And it is Paranormal Realities, right?
Paranormal Realities, yes.
Okay.
This is the first book in the series.
And this kind of talks a little bit about how you got started in ghost hunting and demonology, right?
Yes, yes. It has my beginning in demonology and in ghost hunting, paranormal investigations. I talk about one of my first experiences.
You can put it down. You have to
Yeah, okay.
for an hour.
That is
commercial.
That is a great house on the cover. It almost looks like the haunted Victorian, but
Yes, it does, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
not the Victorian, but it does bear a resemblance to the haunted Victorian.
where do you know? Do you remember where that is? Or
I'm not sure where this is, because we were standing in front of an old church or house or something in Leominster, Mass, and so that house looked very good too. I thought they would use that as the background, but they used this, and I'm not exactly sure where it is, but they just that in back of us. So
They
it
liked
looks
it.
fabulous.
thank you very much.
So, anyways, have you always lived in the paranormal growing up? I mean, experiencing it as a child?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I grew up believing in spirits. I was raised in a Christian household, so naturally I believed in angels and demons from a very, very young age. I didn't necessarily want to experience the demons, but from a very young age, and we had some activity in our house. And it wasn't an old creepy house. It was a ranch house that was built for our family. So it was new when we moved into it.
Oh, wow.
Now, there was a very historic old house next to it where my grandfather lived. It's just possible, something in the territory or on the grounds may have been affecting that. But I know some people did play with a Ouija board at the other house, which a lot of people do. You know, it's a parlor game over the years. But yes, I experienced things. My brother and my sister and I experienced things from a very young age, and nothing really terrifying. My mother was drinking a glass of water on a summer night, and she got a little choked up. She started drinking it, and all of a sudden, just saw the water just vaporize.
Really?
And it made that sound too. That's the sound it made.
Oh my God.
You know, you heard it sound. I saw it. I remember seeing it bubbling up. My brother and I were about 5 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And we thought, wow, that is so neat. That is so neat. You know, that is neat.
I don't think
Yeah,
Mom
I've been out
thought
drinking with Ann,
that.
and I've seen
Oh,
that happen.
Stop it. Stop
No.
it. Yes, I guzzled down that water.
Wow,
Because
that was
absolutely
I was
right.
thinking, right?
well, we called that our thirsty ghost, of course.
So
Wow.
that was your first experience.
Yes, yeah. And then I would hear voices outside the window, not knowing what they, of course, my mom said, that's just your imagination, just your imagination. I said, I was awake, I heard it. But, of course, when I was a teenager and started happening again, then I had no doubt.
No.
But I was 10 years old, and I was in a house in Little Compton, an abandoned house. It's just something you did in those more innocent times.
Right.
You, in the 60s, you know, you're coming back from the beach, and there's this house that nobody lives in. Let's walk through it. My mother would, you know, do little clippings from the garden, and we call it the haunted house because it was in great condition, but it looked like a, you know, typical haunted house.
Neglected.
Stereotype, yes.
Yeah.
And so I went upstairs, and come on, Keith, we got to leave. My mother's beeping the horn, and I just want to take one more walk through it. I felt this compulsion to look into a room down the end of the hallway. So I looked into it, and there's this rocking chair going like this fast. And so I just looked for a second. Then I was out of there so fast, you know, down the stairs and everything, and my little shorts. And of course, nobody believed me when I'm hyperventilating in the car. Nobody believed me, but I guess you could say that was my first paranormal investigation. I mean, with all the equipment we use on investigations that you're familiar with, and all the hours we spend, what I would give, and I was just 10 years old, what I would give to just walk into a house and just be able to see that and to record it.
Right.
You know, I don't think it would have happened if I had a movie camera with me or something like
Of course,
that.
no, it never does. No.
No.
That's the interesting thing about nowadays. If you don't have it on film, it doesn't happen.
Right.
And
Right, exactly.
sometimes
exactly.
if you
Even
even
if you
did
have it on
have
film,
it
it
on
didn't
film, no
happen.
one believes it anyway.
Some of
you know.
the most fantastic things I've experienced have been when you had no camera going, no recorders going,
Right.
and everything. And I often wondered, gee, if I did take out a camera, what would have happened? If I was recording it, what would have happened? Because they kind of second guess you. You can't second guess them, you know. So.
Oh,
Spirits.
we have a question.
Oh.
Chat room question. Question from Ceiling Cat. Does one particular type of building or structure or material add to or enhance haunting?
Yes, and that would be, I'll point out an example, Slater Mill, Pawtucket, Rhode Island. The mineral content in the stone buildings and the stone structures, there's quartz, mica, minute traces of gold, and of course, you know, the crystal, and in our watches sometimes the crystal, we call that the Pizer effect. And it's, well, Richard Felix, you remember Richard Felix in England?
Oh, yes.
Tape
Yeah.
theory.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he goes as far as to say that some structures are just like recording devices because of the stone structure in them. And that's where, you know, there's the theory that spirits can manipulate that, or even if it's residual, if it's just a playback, it's because of the mineral content. And of course, Slater Mill is right by the Blackstone River, and the mineral content in the rushing water causes some current. So I think that's why old buildings sometimes and old stone structures, which is why in England they have so many of these old buildings where you get these residuals that playback spirits.
Yeah, that's yeah. I know Richard's theory very well. There's also.
Do you agree with it?
I think it's possible. I mean,
Yeah.
it's nothing we can really prove. I mean, we can theorize about it, but we can't really prove it. In other words, we can't reproduce the situation where we can. In other words, we can't take a clump of minerals and then say, okay, we're going to have a ghost
No,
appear.
we can't reproduce it. That's the thing. We can't reproduce it in the laboratory, maybe to a certain extent, but that's a long way in coming.
Yeah.
I often have wondered to myself, though, in the Bible, when Jesus on Palm Sunday, when he rides into the city, when he's criticized by the Pharisees, they say, tell your people to stop this noise. And he says to them, if they were to stop, the very rocks would speak and shout. Well, I wonder how literal that could have been.
Right.
I
There's,
often
there's
wonder.
actually a lot of cool stuff in the Bible that, we always kind of like poo-poo over. But I mean, for instance, mediums. We always talk about mediums.
Right.
And one of the things they always get asked, well, if the ghost is German, how come you can understand them, right? But then we look at like when Jesus was addressing the crowds, and they were from all over parts from the world, yet they all understood him.
Right.
So, I mean, why couldn't that energy, that spirit energy that we have, be the same?
That's true.
Also, like on Pentecost Sunday, when they spoke and people thought they were drunk. No, it's only 9 o'clock in the morning, but everybody understood in their own language, and it's like the universal translator on Star Trek.
Yeah, there you go. That's what we need.
Right. That would come in handy.
That would be good. So, yeah, there's also, of course, if you go with the stone tape theory, there's also the water theory as well, where water also can record energy as well. In fact, I think NASA has been playing with that. And, of course, that Japanese scientist, who I'll never be able to pronounce his name, if you do talk nicely to water, then it produces positive energy versus, like, if you swear at it. And
I thought that was plants.
I had to talk to the water?
Well, yeah, they actually, I'll have to go into that another time. Save that for another show.
Okay.
But speak about plants, I mean, I actually, what most people don't know is back in the 70s, I actually manufactured and sold a device called the Plant Talker, which was a biofeedback device for plants. And we sold this to educational institutions. It was pretty cool. You could connect it up to the leaves of the plant, and the plant would react to, for instance, if you blew smoke into it, it would react. If certain people walking in, if it plant didn't like you, it would. Oh yeah, because it turned the rhythm into an audible sound.
Oh.
So you could actually, it would almost sound like scream. It was a pretty cool thing.
That's amazing.
I've never heard of that.
Plant
That's pretty
Talk. It was
bizarre.
in Playboy magazine.
So that was that show,
maybe
Ron
that's why
Kolek, the
I've never
Science
heard of
Guy,
it.
right?
Yeah, not quite. The funny part is I never had experiences growing up about ghosts. I mean, I was never even interested in them until I had a near-death experience, and then that's how it kind of all started. But anyways, we're here to talk about you, not me.
That's right.
So you have 2 other books. Oh, wait a minute. We talked about, now, how did you're a little kid running through a house, but how did you get from that to working, for instance, with Taps before they even had a TV show?
Okay, well, what happened? Oh, they have a question?
Oh, we do have a question.
Don.
Oh, my goodness. A question from
Forget it.
Zombicatus.
Better you than me.
Do you feel that buildings that get investigated a lot lose their energy, or do you think that the constant investigations build the energy up?
Or does it change it, too?
Yeah.
That's another question.
Yeah, I think it kind of does have an effect on it. I think it changes it. I think, like, for me, going in the buildings at Slater Mill, I rarely ever experience anything myself. Once in a while, if I have a tape recorder with me, I've experienced things. But I think the more recognition you give, and depending on the type of spirit, the more you're feeding it energy. You're feeding it curiosity, you're giving it attention, just like a child. You give it attention and it's going to react. So yeah, sometimes the more somebody investigates a house, the more energy will be brought in, the more it will react to that.
It's interesting, too, because the Houghton Mansion, or Houghton Mansion, whatever you want to say it.
Houghton.
Whatever. In North Adams, right? We were the first one to investigate that years and years ago. And I've been there many, many times. And you can actually feel how the energy has become different. Because it's been opened up to paranormal investigations many, many, many times.
Oh, yeah.
And so I almost believe that people bring their own energy to it. And
That's a good point, Ron. Very good point. In fact, well, I'll get back into this more later on, but the first major home that I investigated, in-home investigation, when I was still a teenager, that my brother and I investigated, The feeling then was palpable. You could almost cut it with a knife. The same location, you go in there now, it's very, very different. It's just like, you know, any older home that you go in, a nice couple there, and very totally different because different people live there.
Ah,
Yeah.
Right.
all right. So let's go back. Your book, Paranormal Realities.
Yes.
You talk a little bit about how you got involved in from just as a kid. Now you're doing it
Right.
as an organized group. So
Right.
how did that all come about?
Okay, well, my brother and I attended a lecture. Of course, when this is back in the early 70s, of
Oh, God,
course,
yeah.
and you're going out looking for supernatural, paranormal phenomena. They called it psychic back then. You're looking for psychic phenomena, and so the basic consensus was, you know, you people are crazy. You know, but it wasn't as accepted. I mean, they had TV shows about it then, but it wasn't really as accepted actually doing it. But my brother and I attended a lecture by Ed and Lorraine Warren,
Oh, there you go.
yeah, at Rhode Island College, and that's basically what, hey, maybe we're not so crazy after all. These people go all over the world investigating haunted sites, and they even get into the demonology aspect because, as you know, Ed Warren was a recognized demonologist by the Catholic Church. And we attended that lecture. My brother actually got called up on stage
Oh, geez.
because, I mean, he was doing a lot more experimenting with the phenomena than I was. And so Ed asked, is anybody involved in the occult or anybody really had experiences? And my brother raises his hand, come down here, young man. And I was like, oh, no, here we go, you know. But that's how we met Ed and Lorraine. And it was that night we were approached by the organization who had hired the Warrens to come to Rhode Island College. It was called Parapsychological Investigation and Research Organization.
Oh, my God. that's a
Pyro.
mouthful.
Pyro. For
Pyro.
Sure. Yes, right. We weren't pyromaniacs, but we were
Wow.
invited to come to some meetings and give some talks, and that's how we joined. We were invited to join. So at 17, my brother Carl and I joined our first actual investigation group,
Nice.
legitimate group like that. So there actually was the only one on campus at Rhode Island College, and most people didn't even know about it. But we joined Pyro, and that's how we became involved in our first major case. And how we became involved in our first in-home case was, this is before the internet, of course.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So way before. The military had it, but we didn't. So I put an ad. I thought it was pretty well designed. I drew borders on it, made it artistic, archaic writing, and gave it to a local newspaper publication and said that we do investigations of things that are not explained free of charge. I thought it'd just be laughed at or ignored, but I thought it was worth a try. Well, 3 weeks later, a woman from Harrisville, Rhode Island, contacted us. Her name was Carolyn Perrin. She had recently, a few years before, moved into a house that she said was infested by spirits, and you had to be there to believe it. Anything that was going on there. It had started out kind of fun. The children were seeing spirits. They thought they were real people. That's how real they looked to the children.
Wow.
But then it started picking on her, harassing her. She started being targeted. Anything from she would just come out of the shower into what they called the warm room. A coat hanger leapt off the rack and started banging her on the head. And talk about being made to feel welcome in your own home. It was an 18th century home and very, very old. And then one day she was cutting an orange and all of a sudden blood started oozing, just pouring out of it onto her toes, and she just practically passed out. She felt that something really didn't want her there. She was being targeted, and this had been going on for a few years. So she came to us as
Years.
Yes, yep, a few years.
Oh.
So let me interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Perrin, is that the one that was in the news?
Conjuring,
The
Conjuring,
Conjuring.
yes.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
right.
the.
Wow.
So you
Wow.
guys did it way before anybody else did.
Yes, we were the first ones on the scene.
Oh, my God.
We were the first ones on the scene.
Wow.
And she, of course, when she told us her story, she said, "So do you think I'm crazy?" Looked at us very hopefully, and I said, "Absolutely not. We're going to do our best to help you, Mrs. Perrin." And she smiled. First time I saw her smile, and she felt this surge of relief that somebody believed her. So we came and we investigated the house, and I'll make it brief. We went in, and it was like a force field, and that's the house I mentioned. That it's totally different today, of course, but it was like a force field on that property. We went into the barn where allegedly the legend was that somebody had hanged themselves in that barn, and you could just feel this palpable energy in the house. The children grabbed onto my wrist. There was 5 daughters, and the younger daughters wanted to give me a tour of the property. They took me upstairs. They said how frightened they were. Meanwhile, my brother had been on his way to use the bathroom down the hallway. All of a sudden, he sees this dark gray vaporish cloud coming towards him. He didn't know what to do. You know, should I run? Should I hold my ground? So he just stood there, and it kind of came up to him. And this was at sunset, like I said, when it's just getting dark. And he put his hand out and touched it. It was electric. He felt this tingling sensation, and it just vaporized.
That's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. So the children took me in the room. They told me how scared they were. There's not all the spirits in there were bad, but there was one that was really tormenting their mother and making them afraid. So I asked, well, what religion are you? Do you ever go to church? Oh, yes, we're Catholic. And so I said, well, try calling upon the name of Jesus. As soon as I said that, everything just, bam, you know, a window slammed shut like that. It was a window that could not be closed because it was such humidity.
Yeah.
It just slammed shut. One of the girls got slapped on the side of her head. It was actually the left side she got slapped on, which is significant. When it's a demonic spirit, they usually come in from the left side. And she practically knocked off the bed. They're screaming and crying. But the worst thing, I think, was the atmosphere. It's just like somebody turned on an electric switch, and you felt this drawing from your chest. You just felt it drawing. You felt sick and nauseous.
Wow.
But I was a teenager, but I was the closest thing to an adult in the room. So I just kept calling upon the name of Jesus, and it left the room. It didn't leave the house, but it did leave the room. And they looked around, it's gone, it's gone. And so they gave me a group hug and kissing me. We came downstairs. Oh, it's you know, better. Keith helped us, you know. But we spent some time there that night reassuring. And our next meeting, I suggested maybe we should think about calling Ed and Lorraine Warren in on this, because this is really, really heavy, and they deal with this type of malevolent haunting. Meanwhile, it was less than a week after our initial visit. Carolyn, it was just breaking dawn, just starting to get light. She woke up, and she felt something was not right in the room. And she looked over, and something's fizzling on her dresser. She just saw like sparks or something on her dresser. And she smelled this terrible scent of decay. Ew. She turns around, and there's this woman standing over her bed.
Oh, my God.
You couldn't really see the face. Just basically you could see the shadow of eyes and some teeth, but otherwise it looked like a desiccated hornet's nest, it was described. And instead of hands, she had cracked bones, and she was wearing like 18th century clothes with a little you know, apron and a gray dress with ruffles. And the strange thing is, her neck was like broken. The head was hanging on one side. And it started saying this chant to her, this incredible chant. I'll drive you mad with fiery brooms. I'll drive you mad with death and gloom. I'll drive you out, but 'twill be too late, for you'll be dead. 'Twas mistress here once, 'twill be mistress again. And I mean, Carolyn's, she's trying to scream, but she can't. Nothing will come out. She's banging her husband, Roger. Roger doesn't move. But then it just vaporized, just disappeared. Finally, Roger woke up, but he had gouges on his back from top to bottom, bleeding profusely. So she was very frightened that morning.
I think I'd be leaving.
Right. Our chairperson, Donna Neufeld, she got a call from Carolyn, and Carolyn said, I can't take this anymore. I mean, I'm a tough Georgia farm woman. I've grown up with horrendous things, but this is beyond me. I don't know what I'm going to do. Described to Donna what happened. So Donna Neufeld, who was, of course, our case manager and our chairperson, she told Carolyn, as soon as I get off the phone, I'm calling the Warrens. Calling Ed and Lorraine Warren. They're friends of ours. They've had a lot of experience. And she did call them. That's how Ed and Lorraine became involved in that case.
Wow. So they actually investigated before we even had
yes. We, you know, our team called them in.
Amazing.
Yep.
Donna had given them a call, and they came, that's how they became involved in the case to investigate.
So, I mean, how did you get so involved into the demonology aspect versus just the investigating part?
Well, I had always felt that I felt like a calling to do this. I mean, calling sounds, you know, very. I'm not saying that.
No, I
was,
believe in that stuff. Callings and that you're.
Yeah, I just felt I was being led to that. I was being led to that,
Right.
and I prayed about it. How can I possibly help people in these situations? And that's around the time we met Ed and Lorraine, and this case happened. And of course, things like that are few and far between. It wasn't until years later that my brother and I got called into a possession case. We got called into a possession case, and you know, one thing led to another, and it seemed that we just kept hearing about and meeting people that were so oppressed. We found out this is much more common. Yeah, it's people were going, and of course they sought us out because of our knowledge about this. Not that we're experts. I mean, there are no experts in this field, but people were calling.
Well, you've had the experience, and the more
right.
you get it, the
That's
more
it,
experience
you know,
you have.
we're not experts, but we're experienced.
Right.
You know, and then of course I met my lovely wife Sandra. We met actually in theater, not on an investigation. We met doing theater, and she had an interest in the paranormal, but had never really gone on an investigation or actually sought it out. She used to watch the TV programs, and one day, of course, I had joined TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society, this small group with just several members, little website at the time, you know, but I found out that I was living in Warwick at the time when Sandra and I were first married, and I found out that Jason Hawes, the founder, lived in Warwick too, so of course I contacted him, and he was like, where you guys been all my life? So Carl and I joined TAPS and the Atlantic Paranormal Society. I had been doing a house blessing, and I came with TAPS. I came back, I was listening to the recording for EVPs, and Sandra's in the other room listening to it. All of a sudden she comes on and says, I'm living with the exorcist, because she hears me doing the prayers and everything, and the you know, rebuttals and things. But she eventually developed quite an interest and joined me in the work, as we say. And of course, John Zaffis, one of my colleagues, because he's Ed Warren's blood nephew,
Right.
so we became friends. And so Sandra became a very quick study and started joining me. It was like she'd been doing it all her life. And so I think she was called to too. Interestingly, Sandra had, since she's not up here speaking with me, I'll speak for her, but she had had an experience when she was very young. She's about 19 years old, and a family member came into the room and saw this gigantic shadow person standing over her.
Oh.
And now she wasn't aware of it. In fact, the family member didn't tell her till a few days later because he didn't want to scare her too much. But Sandra theorized because spirits do not necessarily live in the same time frame as we do. They do not see time. They actually knew that she was going to get involved in the work. So maybe that's why she had this appearance.
Wow. We do have another question.
We do.
If we have time to
Yeah,
get
we
there.
do.
We have another question from Stealing Cat, who would like to know, do you think that skeptics can be haunted or have spirits drawn to them? And have you ever met a convert?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. Unfortunately, when something happens to them, they're usually the first person out of the room. Because, hey, this is real. But no, but you know, it's understandable how people can be, and you should be skeptical. You should be primarily skeptical. And some people have never had these experiences, and you know, we're not going to say, well, we'll pull a genie out of the bottle. You believe in the jinn? You know, here it is. But but some people never believed in it. Carolyn's husband, Roger, total skeptic, never believed in it. She herself was not that strong a believer in spirits. She didn't really have a spiritual belief until she moved into that house.
Wow.
And of course, that changed them both
It's a
for
crash
life.
course. Wow.
Exact crash course is right.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, ever since I started doing it, I mean, I always got involved in protection. To me, that was very huge. And, you know, one thing I always did was the St. Michael's prayer. That was always a good one. We always would say that before. It's funny, I've got my own little collection, but these were all like given to me from certain people that in my life that I didn't even know, but they wanted me to have them. And to me, they're, you know, this is a cool one. Maureen gave me, this is a hematite cross, okay? And I've had it blessed. I had it blessed. And it has a clasp on the end of it, you know, so it broke. So I brought it to Circles of Wisdom in Andover to have it fixed because there was a girl there. And I wore this every time I went on an investigation or anything that I did. And she went and she picked up and she said, "Oh, I don't want to touch that. That's
Really?
evil. There's evil all over it. There's negative energy in it."
Wow.
So she wouldn't touch it. Anyways, but I actually almost could see how that could happen. Is if I'm using this as protection, the energy, the negative energy, instead of going towards me, might be absorbed into the crystals of the hematite.
Oh, crystals, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, that made kind of a sense in a way. I mean, because I cleansed it, had it re-blessed and everything else. But things even like my big ass cross, which
Is that the official name of it?
I do call it that, and I say that and not disrespect at all, because the Lord knows I love them. But it's even good. Do you see it has the skull and crossbone on it?
Oh, let me see.
Can you see that?
Oh, yes.
And people say, why does a cross have the skull and crossbone on it? It's actually, that goes to, and I cannot say the name, the hill where Christ was crucified.
Calvary?
That's, everybody says Calvary, but it was
Golgotha.
Golgotha
Yeah.
means the
Place of the skull.
Place of the
Because
skull.
the hill actually
Right.
does resemble a human skull.
Yeah.
Makes
So
sense.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and this actually was used to protect some pieces from the Amityville Horror House.
Amityville Horror?
Yeah.
Really? Was
Yeah.
it? Wow.
Wow.
At a thing I was doing. But, I have other stuff I do. But just that whole point of all that stuff that I have is that I really, really believe in protection. And we don't know what we're dealing with. There are
Right,
so many
right.
spirits.
Yeah.
And if you go on Facebook and some of these other things, and wow, we're running out of time. Well, you're a great guest. But you'll see all these people will come up there and they're ghost hunters, amateur ghost hunters, or whatever they want to call themselves.
I don't think it's any professionals, but
No,
some people get paid
well,
very well, but
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what would you say? So, anyways, they'll be, they'll say, "Oh, I took something home with me," or they, they'll get scratched or anything, and they're scared. What would you tell those people? I mean, Carl, I mean, you work with spirit.
Right.
That's
I mean,
Keith.
Keith, sorry.
I'm very used to it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm very used to it. I answer to both.
Carl must be thinking of us. So, Keith, what would you tell those people? I mean, should they be afraid, or
if you have, as in it says in the Bible, if you have faith, even faith as a grain of mustard seed, you don't need to be afraid. You can have, yes, these things are very terrifying. They do hurt people. They can and do hurt people, but faith can do wonders. And I think nobody needs to be afraid. There is help out there, and with faith, there's always somebody you can contact, and so the help is out there. Just do any kind of Google search, and you see how much is. That wasn't true when I started out, obviously. Obviously, few and far between.
Well, that's the thing. When you started out, there weren't that many people involved in demonologists. Now it's a chick thing to do.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
everybody wants to be a demonologist.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, and
that's
that
the point,
scares
yeah.
me. That really scares
Right.
me. It does.
Yeah, I don't. I always say this. I don't have a plaque on my wall that says I am certified by the Vatican, registered demonologist. And, no, it's just that's a term. It's a term that just has been used, and I became the TAPS demonologist. My brother and I became TAPS demonologist, and it was just a title to show what we specialize in.
Right.
It doesn't mean I'm registered. It just means I have a certain amount of
Right.
study and experience in this. And of course, I always believe a demonologist should be an angelologist because,
That's
pretty
true.
much the opposite side of the coin.
We should probably, do you have a website
Oh yeah, we gotta
that
get
people,
that up.
they need to
Yes.
contact you?
Yes, nearparanormal.com, www.nearparanormal.com.
Okay.
It's been down
There
the
it
past
is,
couple
on
of
the bottom
Right on
third.
the screen. Yes.
It's been down the past couple of days because I was on coast to coast, and then of course, so many
Overload.
hits, it just
Oh,
overloads
wow,
it.
yeah.
Crashed it,
but
yeah.
Right.
very, very huge listening audience. But
Okay.
got Paranormal Realities.
Get the books up.
Yes.
Yep. Paranormal Realities 2. And this cover design is by Lisa Dualaby's husband, Raymond
that's cool.
Dualaby. That's
Wow.
actually their daughter there.
Oh
Oh,
wow.
Wouldn't know it, but that's a daughter looking very ghostly.
in front of a
real-
cemetery. That's
yeah,
a mausoleum door.
which
I
was
can
actually
tell from
broken into
here.
one time.
Really? Yeah.
Mausoleum was broken into one time, and they pulled the body out, or something. Somebody did. But
Okay.
Yep. It's a wrap.
and Paranormal Realities
Realities 3.
3. And
Awesome.
this cover is beautiful. It's designed by one of our team members, Janine Kolken.
Nice.
Very good.
And of course, we have Nathan Mayer, our near team
Yes.
members.
Yes.
And
And our audience every
yes,
month.
you're
Yay.
right there in the audience, the studio audience.
So we
Lovely,
got the
lovely
wrap
studio
sign.
We
audience
did
here.
get the wrap cue, so we do need to wrap up, and we thank you very much, Keith.
Oh,
Yeah,
it was
you know,
wonderful.
we'd love to have you on the radio show, not that one you can do at home. You wouldn't have to drive 6,000 miles to get to. But I'd like to continue this conversation because
definitely,
it's very
definitely. We're
interesting
just
with
getting
you.
started.
Yeah, and so we want to thank you so much.
We do thank you, and we just we want to end the show this evening with a little tribute to our crew member Emily Miller, who we love and miss very much. And we want to thank everybody for watching.
Yeah.
And we will see you again
Next
next
week.
month. Next month.
Next week.
Thank you. Good night.
On the morning when I woke up without you, for the first time, I felt free, and I felt lonely, and I felt scared. And I began to talk to myself almost immediately, not being used.
Emily Tootsie Miller came to the EBC TV Multimedia Club in September 2013, a freshman and a new member who was excited to help out and learn about video production. She was a fast learner and was very comfortable running camera, editing, or working in the control room. She crewed on almost every one of the last 9 shows of Ghost Chronicles Next Generation and loved it. Loved the paranormal and was very involved with productions at EBC TV in general. I have seen her hair go from purple to blue to green and to shades of all 3. She was a free spirit, a vegan, and a witch, and told me she was going to change her name to Emerald over the summer. She was a member of the drama club and the art club and was an amazing artist for someone so young. She was bright and funny, loved Star Trek, eclectic music, and Oreos, and had planned to produce her own music show at EBC TV over the summer. To say we are heartbroken is an understatement. We will miss her badly, but will always, always remember her nonconformity, her artistic talent, and her wit. Emily, you will always stay close to our hearts. Namaste, our friend.
And the wind began to blow, and all the trees began to bend, and the world in its cold way started coming alive. And I stood there like a businessman, waiting for a train, and I got ready for the future to arrive. And I sang, oh, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do without you?
From ghoulies to ghosties, long-leggedy beasties, and things that go bump in the night. Deliver us, good Lord.